Hey, what's up you guys, it's Dorothy and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're going to go into part 2 of chapter 10 of The Mothers and Daughters of the Bible Speak by Shannon Bream. So let's get right into this video. This video is going to contain topics of the Bible. If you do not wish to continue, I suggest you click off the video now. You have been warned. Elijah made this desperate mother a promise she had no idea if he'd be able to keep. He would have to be a legitimate prophet and miracle worker for any of this to come true. Elijah was asking her to step out in faith even though she did not know Elijah's God. He was about to show up for her in a very real way. Notice Elijah was saying to her, "Make me something to eat first, then you're free to make a meal for you and your son." How many times have you found yourself in a similar situation? Your resources are limited, but God is calling you to act. Do you struggle to trust in His plans when you can't see the end result? I cannot tell you how many times I've seen my mom model this. We didn't have much when I was growing up, yet she always found the resources to bless others. Taking someone a meal, donating to a missionary, raising support, finding a way to work, volunteer tutoring into her already jam-packed schedule. If my mom felt moved by the Lord to meet someone else's needs, I never saw her hesitate or question how God would make up the difference. Deficit. I have no doubt that if my mom was the widow in this story, that bread for Elijah would have been made pronto. By the way, her homemade bread is one of the most delicious things you will ever taste, so be sure she knows you need a loaf. The widowed mother in Zephleth was just as faithful. She went away and did as Elijah had told her. 1 Kings 17:15. Guess what? God is infinitely more faithful than we could ever be, and what Elijah pledged to that desperate mother came to fruition. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family, for the jar of flour was not used up and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken by Elijah. 1 Kings 17:15-16. Here the entire region was gripped by crippling famine and starvation, but the faith and sacrifice of a mother wound up providing everything she and her son needed until God lifted His hand of judgment from Israel. 3.5 years. God's provision for this mother in need wasn't over yet. We're told in 1 Kings 17:17 that her son later became very ill. He grew worse and worse and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, "What do you have against me? Man of God, did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" 1 Kings 17:17-18. My first reaction to this passage was, you've seen the miracles of Elijah's God, saving both you and your son, and now you're accusing him of this? Then I remembered, I myself have seen God's provision and intervention, and I have also panicked in the face of tragedy. Our faith is imperfect at times, but God is faithful regardless. "Give me your son," Elijah replied. He took him from her arms, carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself out over the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, "Look, your son is alive." Then the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." 1 Kings 17:19-24. I can't condemn this woman for doubting when I've done it myself. She must have been in great despair, and God heard Elijah's powerful cries on her behalf. Remember, she referred to God as your God. 1 Kings 17:12. When they first met, by the end of her story, this mother was no longer keeping God at arm's length. Her language shifted, she believed. Elijah's successor, Elisha, was also a conduit for God's mercy on a struggling mother during this time of prophecy and the ministry. This widow had been the wife of a prophet as well, and she cried out to Elisha for help when it appeared she was about to lose her sons too. "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord, but now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves." Elisha replied to her, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" "Your servant has nothing there at all," she said, "except a small jar of olive oil." 2 Kings 4:1-2. This woman had been left with no male provider or protector, and she was about to have her sons stripped away from her as well. Elisha saw this distraught mother's plight and immediately launched into action. He began by asking her how he could help her. I think this is one of the most important questions we can utter when someone is in crisis, meaning well, we often default to saying, "Just let me know if I can help." But by directly asking this mother to tell him how he could make things better for her, Elisha let her know he was about helping her find a concrete solution. The widow had nothing to offer to the effort other than a little bit of olive oil. That plus her faith wound up being more than enough. God will never ask more of us than we have to give. Throughout the Bible, we see how he multiplied what humans offered to him. He created everything we know and more out of nothing. He doesn't need what we have. What he wants is our faith. In every one of the stories in this chapter, faith and trust precede the miracle God delivers. It's the key ingredient that we can only offer. The prophet prepared them both for a miracle. Elisha said, "Go around and ask all of your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side." 2 Kings 4:3-4. This wondrous supernatural provision was going to be a community effort. This frantic mother herself, once married to a prophet like Elisha, knew the power of his words and didn't hesitate to follow his directions. She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another one." But he replied, "There is not a jar left." Then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left." 2 Kings 4-5, chapter 4, 5-7. What a story this mother had to tell. Frightened and with virtually no options left for her family, she cried out for help. I love that the miracle God delivered through Elisha wasn't just isolated to this widow and her 2 sons. It involved everyone who knew their plight and willing to hand over a jug or container for oil collecting endeavor. The widow anticipated divine deliverance, and she communicated that to everyone else by collecting all those vessels. She was then able to testify to each and every one of them as she returned their vessels empty, having sold the oil they miraculously contained at one point. I don't know about you, but I love rejoicing in seeing someone else's suffering turn into joy, their need into a solution, and their deficit into abundance. We rarely know exactly how God is going to work in any given situation, but we will never be wrong if we go to him and ask him for help. Occasionally, God's answer to our prayers comes in the way we hope. More often, the resolution arrives via an unexpected path, but always in a way that grows our faith and gives God the glory. The brightest examples of hope in my life right now are people who are walking through dark valleys. Their reliance on God and deliberate choice to dig their foundations even deeper into his promises despite their circumstances is both a challenging and inspiration to me. I pray that just as he was in the stories of these obedient widowed mothers, God will be so clearly evident in my friends' journeys. Centuries ago, and in many places still today, widows were incredibly vulnerable without a husband to protect and provide for them. All throughout the Bible, God makes clear that we are to care for mothers in distress. Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. Exodus 22:22. I'm going to leave it off right there, and I will see you guys in part 3 of chapter 10 in the next video. Bye!